Hi guys, Christie here. Today I'm taking you through some examples of how to use dynamics in your flute playing, how to interpret the dynamic markings that are on your sheet music, and I'm also going to talk you through some techniques that are essential in avoiding some really common problems with intonation, and that's playing in tune when you are trying to play either very soft or very loud. But before we begin, make sure you hit the subscribe button on your screen right now. Do it so you don't forget about me and so that you don't miss any of my amazing video tutorials that will help to improve your flute playing. All right, so what are dynamics in music and what is their purpose? The word dynamics in music means the use of volume changes. And just like when you are talking and telling a story, you use volume to create certain emphasis on different words or phrases. So for example, when you're excited, your voice tends to get louder and louder, or if you're angry or upset, you might just blast out loud. If you're telling a secret, you naturally lower your voice. And in music, it's just the same. We're always trying to communicate something to our audience. Now, the composer gives us instructions as to how they want their story communicated, using a series of symbols as well as Italian words that are above or below the music staff. And I've given you some examples on this slide right here. Now, these volume changes can be quite sudden, or they can happen gradually over several bars of music. The dynamic spectrum stretches from very, very soft, pianissimo, which can be triple P, to very, very loud, or fortissimo, which can be 4 Fs as the abbreviation. Now, the letter abbreviations are, as I was saying, P, which is Italian, an Italian word piano, meaning soft, F for forte, or loud, and M for mezzo, or moderately. And these can be written above or below the music to show you how loudly you should be playing at a given time. Now, you may be playing mezzo piano, moderately softly, MP in one bar, and then you might be required to jump suddenly to fortissimo, or very loud, in the next. And as I said, these changes can be subtle, or they could be quite dramatic, and there's really no limit to the number of times they occur in a piece. You are totally at the mercy of the composer. Now, more gradual changes in dynamics are called crescendos, growing louder, decrescendo or diminuendo, which is growing softer. Now, the Italian abbreviations that I mentioned before, together with arrow symbols, can tell you the magnitude as well as the duration that gradual change should occur over. Now, it is relatively easy to play at one dynamic level in tune, but when we start to introduce these changes in dynamics, we need to be actively listening to ourselves and making sure some adjustments to our embouchure to ensure that we remain in tune over that entire dynamic change. So there are some common mistakes we make when trying to play softer. The natural tendency is to blow more softly or slower with less support from the abdomen, and to kind of make sure that our sound is still there, we can compensate by tightening our throat or lips to try and maintain some kind of flute tone. But this can sort of make you sound a bit bumpy or airy. Another tendency might be to roll the flute out or push the jaw out quite a bit to decrease the amount of air physically going into the flute. On the opposite end of the spectrum, when we're trying to play loudly, the tendency can just be to simply blow more air faster into the flute. But this will mean that the air vibrations that we create will speed up. And as the frequency of these vibrations speed up, our pitch naturally goes sharp. So every time that we change the airstream, either the speed or the direction of the air, we can affect the pitch. So our embouchure has to be quite flexible in order to compensate for these effects of these changes that we make to the airstream. So we can do a few things with our embouchure to fix this. We can move the lips and jaw slightly forward or back. We can change the size of our aperture, which is the lip opening, the size of the hole that we blow through. We can support our breath better from the lungs and abdomen, and we can change the size of the throat cavity, which is our main resonator. So as I explained before, louder, there's this tendency to go sharper. So overall, we need to be directing the airstream lower into the flute, and that lowers the pitch. As we play softer, the tendency is for us to play flat. And so we need to direct the airstream a little higher to compensate for that, and that will bring our pitch back up again. So using different vowel sounds as we play can accomplish much of this compensation, and it will subtly change the amount and direction of air entering the flute, as well as the size of the throat, its openness or closeness, if you like. So we need to make a mouth shape for certain syllables as we play, and we need a large throat cavity for loud and a smaller one for soft. So we need to make the, as if you're making the sound ah or oh for loud and e for soft, and that naturally brings the jaw and the throat in or out. It can be helpful to visualize blowing hot air for loud and cold air for playing softly. If you visualize yourself playing with hot air, you can open your throat more naturally. And with cold air, you tend to use only a smaller pocket of air at the front of your mouth, and your tongue tends to come up towards the roof of the mouth. So try and do that, visualizing hot air and cold air, a large throat cavity and a smaller one. So things you can do to practice your dynamics. First of all, practice playing just at one dynamic level, in tune on one note, before we start incorporating changes in dynamics, so crescendos and decrescendos. So I recommend starting with moderately loud, MF, and then gradually going louder in tune. And you can play using a tuner. And play, nail these different dynamic levels separately before we then go backwards into the softer dynamics, which tend to be a little harder. And once we have individual dynamic levels at using the correct techniques to keep ourselves in tune, then we can start to link them together. So I want you to experiment with those vowel sounds, ah, e, ah, oo, oo, as you're playing, and also the amount of air pressure. So we should be using the same amount of air technically for a soft note and a loud note. We need to make sure that we're maintaining positive air pressure, because if we allow this air pressure to become too soft, we go flat. So we need to make changes to the throat cavity and embouchure, not specifically the air itself. We can change the amount of air entering the flute, but our support should be the same whether you're playing soft or loud. So experiment with those vowel sounds, maintain a good amount of air support, and using your lips and slightly with your jaw, you can change the direction of air. And you can do all of these things and note how you can change volume but remain in tune. So once you've nailed these individual dynamic levels, you can start to string them together and create crescendos and decrescendos whilst staying in tune using these techniques I've told you. And then we can increase the speed of these changes and then apply them to your music. Well, I hope these tips and tricks have been helpful in describing what dynamics are and how we can go about practicing them and interpreting the symbols and signs and abbreviations that are on our sheet music. Thank you for listening, and I will catch you in the next lesson video. Bye for now.